Welcome to your video lecture on the respiratory system. Now obviously, respiration or breathing is the vital process to sustain human life. It's concerned with supplying oxygen to the cells and removing carbon dioxide, which is actually toxic to the body. So during respiration, oxygen is inhaled into the body. In the lungs, the oxygen is absorbed into the bloodstream and transported to the cells, which will be used in metabolic reactions. The cellular metabolic reactions create energy and carbon dioxide, and the blood transports the carbon dioxide back into the lungs. In the lungs, the carbon dioxide is then extracted from the blood and exhaled from the body. Respiration is therefore dependent on two major systems. It works with the respiratory system to take in oxygen, provide the site for gaseous exchange and expel carbon dioxide. And it also relies on the cardiovascular system because the blood will transport the gases between the lungs and the cells. Let's look at the respiratory system in more detail. So the upper respiratory system starts at the nose, through which air is taken into the nasal cavity. The mucus and cilia, which are your tiny hairs that line the nasal passage, trap dust and bacteria particles. So this is there for protection. As the air passes through the nasal cavity, it's warmed and moistened by any mucus droplets. The warmed, moistened air travels from the nasal cavity into the pharynx or the throat. This then connects the mouth and the nasal passage into the esophagus and the trachea. So let's look at what happens next during the respiration process. So at the top of the trachea is the larynx or voice box. The vocal cords are folds in its lining, and the larynx contains cartilage which keeps the trachea open to the air. The trachea is closed off by the epiglottis during swallowing, and this ensures that any food travels down the esophagus and not into the trachea. The trachea extends to the level of the fifth thoracic vertebra. The trachea then divides into the left primary bronchus and the right primary bronchus, which descends into the left lung and the right lung respectively. The bronchi continue to divide until after branching into secondary and tertiary bronchi, they become bronchioles. The finest bronchiole terminates in little air sacs called your alveoli. It has been estimated that there are around 300 million of them in the lungs. Now your alveoli are moist and surrounded by a network of capillaries. It's here that gaseous exchange takes place. So oxygen is absorbed from the alveoli into the blood and carbon dioxide is taken from the blood into the alveoli. In order for gaseous exchange to take place, new air needs to be drawn into the lungs and the old air will be expelled. This is made possible by the physical structure and location of the lungs. The lungs are located in the upper thorax. The right lung has 3 main lobes and the left lung has 2. A double pleural membrane covers each lung and the lungs are further protected by the rib cage. The intercostal muscles and the diaphragm provide a muscular setting in which the lungs can expand and relax, which is a vital feature of respiration. For air to be taken into the lungs, the air pressure in the lungs has to be less than the external air pressure. This is achieved by making the lungs bigger. For air to be expelled from the lungs, the air pressure in the lungs has to be greater than the external air pressure, and this is achieved by making the lungs smaller. The muscular movement of the diaphragm is involved in increasing or decreasing the lung capacity. During inspiration, the diaphragm will contract, causing it to flatten. This expands the chest, drawing the lungs out, so increasing the size of the lungs. This decreases the pressure in the lungs and allows air to be inhaled. During expiration, the diaphragm will relax, causing it to rise. This decreases the size of the chest. It pulls the lungs in, so reduces the size of the lungs. This increases the pressure in the lungs and allows the air to be exhaled. The normal breathing rate is 10 to 12 breaths per minute, although this increases during exercise and stress and decreases during sleep. Each breath contains approximately 500 mL of air. As we have already mentioned, respiration is not only dependent on the structures of the respiratory system, but also on the cardiovascular system. They need to be able to work together to enable the exchange of gases in the lungs. The blood vessels involved in transporting gases to and from the lungs are the pulmonary arteries and the pulmonary veins. So the pulmonary arteries supply blood to the lungs. They run from the right ventricle of the heart, which contains deoxygenated blood, and the blood releases its carbon dioxide and becomes oxygenated in the lungs. The oxygenated blood is then carried away from the lungs in the pulmonary vein, and the pulmonary veins take the oxygenated blood to the left atrium of the heart, where it passes into the left ventricle and it's circulated around the body. During cellular metabolism, the blood loses its oxygen and absorbs pure carbon dioxide. Now, deoxygenated blood then arrives back in the right atrium and is passed to the right ventricle, and the cycle will keep on repeating.